Welcome to Impact Duty. I'm your host, Manisha Dadlani Kripalani, bringing you empowering stories of friends and people I admire. Their voices have given me joy and the momentum to share their stories with you. Kareem Khubchandani is the Mellon Bridge Assistant Professor of Theatre, Dance and Performance Studies and Women's, Gender and Sexuality Studies at Tufts University. He was born in Gibraltar, raised in Ghana, and completed his undergraduate and graduate education in the US. He is the author of Ishtyle, Accenting Gay Indian Nightlife from University of Michigan Press, and publishes in various journals and online platforms about the relationship between migration, gender, sexuality, art, and creativity. Kareem is also a performer producing work in museums, theaters, and nightclubs. Hi, Kareem. Welcome to Impact Duty. I'm so delighted to have you here.
Thanks, Manisha. I'm really excited to be here.
How have you been? And where are you at the moment?
So I am in Medford, Massachusetts in the US. I teach at Tufts University and I'm a faculty in residence, so I live on campus.
Wow.
I'm the only person in this building because all the students were sent home. So I'm in like a 300-person building and I'm the only person here. I have my little apartment, but I live in Massachusetts and things are fine for the most part here. People are staying safe and so I feel good about that.
That's really good to hear.
Yeah.
All right. And I am so delighted because you've just released and published a book.
Yes.
Wow.
I never, publishing a book was never part of the life plan. It was, I never thought about it. And it feels really good to hold it, to be able to have a dedication in it to my mom. So the book is called Ishtyle, Accenting Gay Indian Nightlife.
Oh, wow.
And then the dedication reads, for my mother, my Ishtyle icon.
Oh, bravo. Wow.
But, I never imagined it, and it's nice that I can hold it, right? It's been on screen for so long, so to hold it feels really good.
I'm so excited for you. And how did you come up with a name like Ishtyle? It's such an incredible name.
Ishtyle is, at some point, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but you and I grew up together in Ghana, right? And it's something we said, Ishtyle, right? And it sort of is about exaggeration and being more than the everyday or trying too hard so it can mean a lot of things. And it's also an accent. It's the way we say style, but accented, right? Especially coming out of Bollywood and Bombay. So it got me thinking that the accent is actually a way that we're often seen in the world. People are like, where are you from? What am I hearing in your voice? Or where did you get that lovely fabric, right? They're always reading the accents on us to interpret our difference. So I use Ishtyle to refer to exactly that sort of Bollywood over-exaggeration, but also everyday ways that people are accented. And how performance becomes a way of interpreting our cultural differences and what's at stake in that. Because you could be exoticized, or it could invite racism, or it could invite a lot of pleasure when people see that difference. So that's where Ishtyle, the title, comes from, and it focuses on gay nightlife and in particular Indian global workers who are moving across borders. So again, when they cross the borders, their accent changes, right?
Right.
Like if you go from North India to South India, you hear that difference. But when you go from South India to the US, a different set of people are hearing a different kind of difference, right? They won't know that it's North Indian. They'll just know it's some kind of Indian, right? So the accent becomes a way of seeing the world and interpreting others. And so for these global Indian workers who, I focus on gay men who, they're not thought of as part of India's story. we're really interested in the global Indian worker, and even in accents and call center workers, but they're always thought of as, they're assumed to be straight. They're assumed to be part of India's conservative, quote unquote, makeup, and they're just sort of doing everyday work. But in fact, the folks that I worked with and interviewed and hang out with are fabulous and having fun and going out at night, and we just don't think about them in those terms. So the book is an opportunity to just rethink who these folks are, and what happens when they bring their different accents into spaces where they're not supposed to be, the nightclub, right?
Right.
And so I was actually out there doing interviews, but also dancing and performing, traveling. I was living in India for a while, doing the research. I was living in Chicago. So I was in Bangalore and Chicago doing the research. And meeting these wonderful people and gathering their stories and trying to represent them in some honest and beautiful way in the book.
Wow. And what took you to writing this book? As in, what was the inspiration or the turning point that got you actually putting pen on paper or fingers on computer?
So, like I said, I never imagined being a writer, but there's sort of a long journey to arriving at this topic and then applying to graduate school to research it, to write. So when I moved from Ghana to the US, I was in a small college in upstate New York. And I went down to New York City to see my brother Rishi, and in the summertime between semesters. And I went to a support group for LGBT South Asians. And I had just come out that very summer. And there were a lot of resources in New York City, and there was one specifically for South Asians. And someone at that group took me to a queer Bollywood party.
Really?
And yeah, and it's a strange thing to imagine, I guess, but the book shows that they're actually everywhere. They're all over the world. And I ended up traveling to them in several different cities and places. But I went to this party and I was 18 years old, and it blew my mind. And it blew my mind because these were the songs that you and I used to dance to at weddings and at the temple and at cultural festivals. And but it was all these beautiful lesbian and transgender and gay people and bisexual people and people of all genders dancing to the songs that we know, right? And not just dancing, but finding a lot of pleasure in them. And the nightclub is supposed to be about pleasure and joy and fun, but it looked different from any other club I had been to in the US or any party I had been to on a college campus.
Right.
And there was a moment where a drag queen comes out and did Mardala. Devdas had just come out.
Really?
And it was glorious. I mean, she didn't dance like Madhuri, but she was still better than Madhuri because she was right there in front of me, right? It was so close to my body. And so I was like, how is it possible? What makes this possible?
Right.
And what are people getting out of it? What are people traveling to this place for? Because I would travel 5 hours to come to New York City just to go to those parties, just to feel like I belonged somewhere. And that for about 5 years, I was commuting from New England into New York just to go there.
Wow.
So that's where this started. And I felt like I belonged, right? It was a place where I felt attractive and beautiful, whereas a lot of gay nightlife spaces that are very body fascist, that privilege white men, that require you to be muscular and hairless. I didn't feel like I belonged in those spaces, but here I did. And I belonged not just because of the way I looked, but the way I knew how to dance.
Right.
Dance is a way of belonging. So when I talk about accents, right, I'm really thinking about the ways our body moves.
Right.
So I was after college, I was working at another small college, and I learned of a discipline called performance studies, where you focus not on theater or dance, but just performance broadly understood. You get to see the world as performance through performance studies. And I applied to this program in Chicago at Northwestern University. And that's where I started doing researching how South Asians are represented in the global sphere, how the history of LGBT community and the importance of nightlife to the LGBT community, how performance can be a way of seeing the world, like I said, through the accent. So I learned all of these in graduate school, and wrote a dissertation that I filed with the university, but then spent 6 years editing to become this book.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's where it started.
So I guess it was it was just like a gradual flow or progress.
You know, it was gradual, but there were some real surprises. Like in Chicago, you know, so I would go to these parties in New York, but in Chicago, I expected there to be parties like this there too, and there weren't. So I started one. I started a party called Jai Ho. Yeah. It's run for 10 years now. We celebrated our anniversary last year. But I started a party, and I remembered that drag queen from that first party I went to, and I was like, there has to be a drag queen at this one. And I couldn't find one in Chicago, so I started doing drag.
Oh.
That's where that began. So I perform as Lahore, Rajasthan, everyone's favorite Desi drag auntie. But it began through my research.
Right.
And then when I started my research there, people were saying, you know, I'm so glad we have these parties here, because in India they don't have this. And then I went to India. Exactly.
Okay.
And so I went to India, and I stayed with my mom and dad, and I sought out through friends the party scene there. And there's a huge, I mean, not huge, but there's a thriving and beautiful nightlife scene there, with its own complications. And, you know, like I said, the US nightlife scene has racism and body fascism and things like that. The nightlife scene there has classism and casteism running through it. And there are problems, right?
Yes.
I'm not saying they're completely joyful, but it's there, and it's amazing. And I was meeting people in both places. That I would meet someone in New York and then run into them in Bangalore, meet someone in Hyderabad and run into them in Toronto. But these are the global Indian workers who are designing our software, and who are writing content for all the things that we're reading, all the instructions we're reading about how to use the internet and how to use objects. And so they're moving across borders, and I'm running into them in all these places. So it was gradual, but really starting the research took me in all these different directions.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And we have a shared background of growing up in Ghana, pretty much growing up together. Okay. But you've lived in many other places in the last 2 decades. How has that shaped you, the Ghana years and post the Ghana years? And how has that kind of led on to the creation of this book?
That's a good question. So I would say growing up in Ghana, and specifically growing up as Sindhi in Ghana, I think I wasn't particularly attached to, I don't have this like deep emotional patriotic attachment to India, right? I was born in Gibraltar, grew up in Ghana. We're Sindhi, so displaced out of Pakistan, not just into India, but across the world. So I think one of the things that's done is allowed me to think, to be able to be critical of nationalism in India, nationalism in the US. It's been, and the way that forces people to act. So these global workers are supposed to perform a very specific kind of proper Indianness. And often being gay doesn't align with that. Right, so they're wrestling with this problem of being attached to being a good immigrant or being a good Indian subject, and I think I've been perhaps released from that by my sort of global displacement, that I'm able to see the ways that people are negotiating that. The other thing is, you know, when I moved to the US, I thought I was moving to New York City, but I was actually moving to New York State, and it was quite far away.
Yeah.
I was, you know, 5 hours away from New York City.
Uh-huh.
But it really, being in this small rural white town, suddenly made me see race in a way that I didn't know it existed in the world. And it, you know, it made it created a sense of loneliness that made traveling to New York to find community very, very important. So as I moved around, so in my senior year of college, I did a study abroad, but it was actually in San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't abroad at all. It was, but
well, pretty much. I mean, it's
I know it was the
across
other
the country. Yeah, exactly.
The other side of the U.S. But it really, I think that was one of that was a time, and I just turned 21 in the U.S. You have to be 21 to drink, and so that's when I could go freely to all the bars, not just the ones that were 18 plus, and I just learned about how diverse and rich LGBT nightlife can be. There's performance, there's community, there's style, there's fetish, there's just everything, right? It's so rich and beautiful and interesting. And the classes I was taking there showed me that the city itself had a history. It was where Asians were first brought to the Americas to build railroads, and we were walking those very streets. So it was where one of the first, before the Stonewall riots, which are 1969, are seen as the beginning of the LGBT global rights movement. There were 2 years before that in San Francisco, there was a riot by transgender sex workers that doesn't get talked about as much, called the Compton's Cafeteria Riot. So being in San Francisco, being inside of that history, learning about it, going to those very clubs that are talked about in books really gave me a sense of why history and place mattered to each other. So when I write the book, I think about how Chicago matters to telling the story of LGBT South Asians, and how Bangalore matters to telling that story as well. That there are very specific places with specific histories. Particular kinds of people are migrating there for different reasons. But that's my own journey has given me that sense of history as well, along
and that perspective.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the other thing, Kareem, that we have in common is our love for Bollywood. I grew up on a staple diet of Bollywood movies. I credit my terrible Hindi to Bollywood movies, but at least I can speak it. So how has Bollywood influenced you? I know it's a big influence, but I'll leave you to tell us.
I mean, so, you know, we grew up dancing at shows, you know, and choreographing shows, and when you graduated, and at some point the mantle was left on me to choreograph performances. You know, it's like we passed down the responsibility of choreographing through each other, and you know, I was choreographing we went to an international school, and we're representing India on our stage, and doing all these numbers that were far from Indian, right?
Yes,
we were dancing like pop stars, and it really, this is the thing, is that, you know, dance can live in our body for a very long time. You learn these moves then, and you still remember them. You still remember how you danced and moved, and that's something that when I got to those gay clubs in New York, that movement was still inside of me. But in the mainstream gay clubs, it's not allowed to come out, right? All that Bollywood dancing, you look like a fool if you start doing full on Govinda. But at these other parties, I could move in the way that I knew how, the way that we had grown up dancing. So I knew that Bollywood was going to be part of this research project. But what I didn't expect was that I was going to, on the cover is Sridevi doing the Nagin dance.
Wow.
And so
I didn't clue into that. So I'm glad you're pointing that out.
So this is the Nagin dance is where she is in the film Nagina. She is a snake who's transfigured into a woman, and so she dances like a snake, like this and like that.
With those contact lenses, don't forget.
I know, the blue contact lenses, right? So it's a fully camp image from when we were growing up.
Right.
But I would see people doing this on the dance floor. And so I would see these movements and I would recognize them. But when I started doing my interviews, I would ask people, what got you into dancing? Why do you like to dance? How do you like to dance? And I have several stories of gay men saying either Sri Devi or Madhuri taught them how to dance.
Okay.
And so we learned to dance from each other, but we borrowed moves from the screens. But a lot of young, lonely, effeminate people, whether they identify as gay or not yet, they're watching the screen and they're seeing something powerful and beautiful and strange in this kind of dancing. And they were mimicking it when they were 5 and 15 years old.
Right.
And so I knew I'd be writing about Bollywood dance, but I ended up writing specifically about how Madhuri and Sri Devi taught these men how to dance when they were younger, and what it means to them to bring their dance to the nightclub now that they're older, now that they're allowed to be praised for dancing in feminine ways, when as a child you're supposed to conform to gender. And that was the case. Like in Ghana, I only got to do the boy steps.
Right.
But also and in the US also, I joined a competitive Bollywood dance team, but I was only allowed to do the boy steps. But really in these nightclubs, you have the opportunity to do it. You don't have to be in drag to do it. You just you can just do it. And that's been really beautiful to write about, is how Bollywood is beautiful and fabulous and great, but has its limitations on who can move what way. But in the nightclub, you can do much more.
Right. And just off the top of my head, do you think we actually have dance role models in Bollywood like the yesteryears? Like I'm putting Madhuri and Sri Devi as the yesteryears, but do you think we have any representation right now of really great dancers that are role models?
The thing now is that everybody has to be a good dancer.
Right.
I think that's the major shift. So, and that's actually one of the things I read about, is that the dance has become an industry for Bollywood. Yes. There was a moment where, Saroj Khan did not, actually they didn't give awards for choreographers or dance directors until Saroj Khan did Ek Do Teen.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So yeah. So she was. So our interface with dance was the actress,
yes,
not the choreographer. And that starts to shift. And then Shamak Davar comes along.
Yes.
And does Dil To Pagal Hai. Choreographs Dil To Pagal Hai. And he basically advertises himself, because he shows that you're in a studio.
Right.
And you can wear these tight leotards, pull your hair back, and learn how to dance in these very regimented ways. And then he opens Shamak Davar's SDIP, I can't remember what it stands for. Yeah. But he opens his studios, and it becomes this huge industry.
Yes.
But before that, we were just watching the screen and copying. We didn't know who the choreographer was.
Right.
So I think that's what has shifted in that timeline. So now, everybody is a good or even great dancer. And someone like Hrithik Roshan does bring his own style. Yes. But Helen often choreographed for herself. Amitabh did whatever movements he wanted. But now
they had trademark movements, didn't they?
They had then moved across film to film. Shami Kapoor as well.
Yeah, Jitendra. I mean, we can all think of their trademark steps. Anil Kapoor,
Yeah, but
good.
now every dance has to look different, you know. So and all these dance competition shows have really shifted that. So it matters that I'm talking about Sridevi and Madhuri because they were really on the cusp
Yes.
of this shift in the kinds of movies that were being made, in the way choreography was being done, and who was being acknowledged as the dancer. Was it Saroj Khan or was it Madhuri? It's with their bodies that shifts.
Right.
Yeah.
And talking about mentors, I'm moving on to mentors for the book. Have there been any mentors in your life to write the book or otherwise in life?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think I got my mentors along the way while I was writing it. I was learning from the people that I was interviewing.
Yeah.
So, for example, when I was integrating into this LGBT South Asian community in Chicago, someone was telling me about Meena Kumari and why she's such an important diva for LGBT South Asians. And I was like, is she? And he had this whole history of her histrionics and the way that she demanded from Kamal Amrohi, her husband and director, that she give him her divorce, otherwise she wouldn't really let him release Pakiza. So all this like full drama that she serves, and she's stunning in the movie and all of that. And she, even though she's not a great dancer, they edit it so that she looks really graceful and incredible on screen. But he gave me all this gossip too about her. But he, you know, I never thought about having a diva, right? And the people I interview actually tell me about their divas, but that was not something that I knew how to talk about or write about. But actually being in the community has taught me how to speak about actresses and dancers, what songs I should be listening to. And so their stories have really shaped what I write. You know, they've really taught me what is important to surviving the world as a queer person to them, so that I can tell the stories through what's important to them. I've also, you know, so I was learning as I was going. I was gathering mentors, I guess, and they continue to hold me accountable just by saying, you know, have you seen this movie yet? Have you watched that? But that's the kind of mentorship that's peer-to-peer that I think is really important when you're writing a book. Is people they're like, I know you're interested in this. Have you seen this? I think that's a really important process to account for. And that's why the acknowledgements are very, very long in this book, is because a lot of people were just invested in the story I was telling about them. And then, of course, this came out of my PhD, and I had incredible educators who took the time to read my work. My dissertation committee of E. Patrick Johnson, Ramon Rivera Cervera, Sohini Madison, Gayatri Reddy, Martin Manalansan, scholars of Black and Latino and Filipino and South Asian and African histories and cultures, who, you know, it took all of their voices, but also their long histories of writing books and producing ideas to shape my own. So, you know, they're really a core set of people that I continue to seek guidance from. And then lastly, you know, the book is dedicated to my mom, but broadly also, you know, I think about aunties and their role as mentors, and they taught me Ishtyle well before I understood that what it meant to be fabulous or beautiful. You know, our mothers were really invested in looking great for each other. You know, they were wearing sequins in the daytime, and they were, you know, they always looked good. And, you know, now, and we don't think about them in those terms. But they showed me that everyday life can be really beautiful and fabulous and fun, right? They were rehearsing dances in the living room. Right? And so this is, I mean, this is the story I'm telling about my gay friends, but in fact, my aunties were teaching me how to be fabulous well before my gay friends were. And to me, that's really important. And I continue to look to them as role models of surviving and thriving beautifully, while moving across borders as well. Moving, right? They all traveled into Ghana.
Totally. And creating connectivity and community literally
through
in a foreign land. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So really they've always been my mentors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Kareem, were there any stumbling blocks or in editing, in publishing, getting this actually done as a work of art?
You know, it's in the writing process, I kept wondering whether it was my quote unquote right to tell this story, you know, because it's all about other people. You know, I am a global Indian worker, but I perhaps have a different history from those people who, after India's liberalization in 1991, get these new kinds of jobs where they have a new mobility, right, to move across borders. We were already displaced out of India. So the people at the core of the book have a very different history from mine. And one thing is to always remind myself, no, I did research, right? I spent a lot of time with them and in their communities. But then I have a chapter that explores the specificities of class, of caste, and of region, of focusing on, but I'm not South Indian, I'm not lower class, and I'm not Dalit. But I still found it very important to think through the logics that those communities give us to say, what is the party do? Who is the party for? What is it doing? Who's left outside of it? Right. So I think really bringing an ethical mind to doing this work, not just saying I want to write about the party and I want to talk about all the fabulous things, but actually say to consider different perspectives in telling that story. What required me to read a lot of things that weren't already in my purview in order to get a better sense. But at least in academic writing, to make sure I was citing, to make sure that I was citing the people who had given me the ideas, because sometimes they're not mine, right? And I'm really relying on other people's theories of how they see the world in order to say this thing about the thing that I saw through their eyes, right? So I think citation for academics becomes a really important way of crediting those who made the ideas available to you. And so reading a lot of Dalit LGBT thinkers and activists was really helpful and necessary to writing some of those things. And then the other piece of this that wasn't necessarily writing the book, but just my own research, was doing drag. It's at the core of the book's method. I'm there on stage, and then people will tell me what they think of my performance. They'll reach out to me because I'm the figurehead of the party, or but it became a way of doing it. But it's hard work. It's sweaty. It takes a long time to get ready. But you also lose cultural credibility. People are like, who is that person dressed like that? That I mean, there are people who don't like me because I do drag. There are people who won't date me because I do drag. And of course, there are people who love that I do it and celebrate it. But I think it is a sort of controversial and difficult stumbling block for others to get over.
Right.
And in that, I lose people I could have interviewed or talked to for the project. I lose people who just think what I do is silly because I dress like a girl, So people who are really invested in the gender binary really write me off, would write my work off, think it's silly. But I have a lot of fun with it. And so at the end of the day, I have to embrace it and enjoy it.
Yes. And what would you like your readers to take away from this book? If there was a core message you'd want people to take away from Ishtyle, what would that be? Or is there any story of a personality featured in your book that you'd like us to hear about or share with us?
There are many. But since I talked about aunties, there's one short section in the book called "Aunties at the Disco," and
Okay.
I read about this moment where I'm at the Bollywood party that I run in Chicago. I used to run in
Right.
Chicago, called Jeho. And we called
Right.
it Jeho because it was 2008 or 9, and Slumdog Millionaire had just
Millionaire.
come
Right.
out, and so everybody just knew the name. So I'm at the party, and I'm on one side of the party, and I hear people screaming and shouting on the other side. So I go through all the sort of thicket of bodies to get to the other side, and I find a circle of Desi dancers doing the thing where they're all clapping, and one
Yes.
person
Yes.
goes in the middle,
Yes.
and they clap for them, and that person does a step, and then the next person goes in, and I was so embarrassed by it. I was like, because I'm like, this doesn't belong here. This is, but then I realized actually the embarrassment I was feeling was being at weddings with my aunties where I know they're going to pull me into the circle, and what am I going to do? And they want to embarrass me, but they also love me, and it's such a strange, awkward moment of being in that
Right.
circle. Nobody wants to go in, but of course you want to go in, right?
Yes. Yes.
But everybody's going to clap for you at the end of the day, so it's fine. But it's that being in the nightclub, being in this very gay nightclub in Chicago, and experiencing that moment of the auntie circle, everybody clapping for each other. It's not, that's not the way the nightclub is supposed to look or feel. But they're doing it and they don't care what anybody thinks. And it was really beautiful. But what it reminded me was that we think we have to leave who we are behind when we come out. And we think we have to leave our culture and our family behind in order to enter the nightclub space. But in fact, there are ways that they come together, right? And I think that's the story for a lot of people, is like, I came out, so I had to leave my family. I came out, so I had to stop acting so Indian, or, because the ways that TV and public culture teach us to be gay is often to look white and to dance alone, or in a couple. But what about this auntie circle? Can we have that again? And that was that moment where I was like, you don't have to leave home to be queer. And that was really important to me. And it's important to the story the book is telling, that the nightclub isn't separate from the rest of our world. It's actually a place where we can be in the world. It's not an escape. It's in fact actually a way of engaging with the world on a deeper level, and through our bodies and through dance. Yeah.
Thank you, Kareem. Thank you. How do we access your book? Is it, can I get it internationally? Is it available to me if I order right now?
Yeah, it should. So it's available via Amazon, and definitely as a digital book anywhere in the world. But in hard copy, it is available on the University of Michigan Press website, hopefully on Amazon, and also Eurospan Books. Is the European distributor. So if Amazon, I know that Amazon has had trouble stocking it during COVID globally, but it should be available everywhere soon. And if not, the Kindle version is available online wherever you are.
Wonderful. Kareem, it's been such a delight speaking to you. I can't tell you how insightful your conversation has been today. It's been an absolute perspective changer. Thank you. I can't wait to get my hands on the book. So I might have to rely, I love paper, but I might have to do the Kindle version for now, because I'm not quite sure if I can access it in Switzerland. But thank you, Kar. Thank you.
It's been so good talking with you. It's like returning home to talk with you.
Wonderful.
Do I have room to tell one more story?
Oh, please, yes.
Yeah. I remember when I was just out of college, I did a little European tour, and I stayed with you. And one night, I went out to gay clubs in Zurich, and I didn't tell you where I was going, but I just wanted to go out on my own. And that night, I went to two clubs. One was like a big club, and it was all fog and you couldn't see anything. And then the other place was this tiny hole of a bar. It was covered in flowery wallpaper, but people were so lovely there and so nice.
Really?
And that just is it. It's another reminder that the club can be home. But the next day when you took me to the train, you didn't have, I didn't tell you where I was, you didn't need to know, but you told me, I love you no matter who you are. And that has stayed with me. And again, but that was what was working in my mind, was that I had to compartmentalize these two places, home and nightclub. And they don't have to be separate, right? And we can invite our families into our world, or we can invite home into the nightclub, even if our families don't accept us, right? There's the possibility of both. And you reminded me of that. So
okay, I'm so glad that you're ending this with that story, because I do remember that scene so very well. We were on the train, we were heading to the airport. And I remember this conversation. So I'm really glad we're ending this episode on that note. Big hugs to you, Kar.
You too.
And stay safe, stay well.
Thanks.
And can't wait to get my hands on the book.
I know. As soon as I know where it's available, I will remind you again.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.